Welcome back to our podcast, Silent Issues. I'm Tisha.
I'm Christina, and today we're going to discuss drugs, in particular with teens.
Many people experiment with drugs, especially in their teen years. Since 2016 to 2020, drug use went up 61% in eighth graders. The most commonly used substances or drugs among teens in 2023 are alcohol, marijuana, which is also known as weed, and nicotine through vaping.
Marijuana is the most used illegal drug in the U.S. Though it is now legal in many states, it is still illegal for kids, yet kids are doing it. In 2022, 1.2 million kids between the age of 12 and 17 began using weed for the first time.
And as a teacher, I know this to be a fact because many of the times our students come in smelling like weed, and we can't tell if it's because they're smoking or because, the parents, because now weed is legal in so many states, and especially medical marijuana, kids can easily tell us, oh, my parents smoke. And technically, nowadays, that's really not, you can't put that as like a child line, like calling, in and saying, oh, this kid is exposed to weed because it is legal. It's the same as if a parent drinks on the weekends or if a parent's smoking cigarettes. So that aspect, we can't just, oh, okay, we're going to call and report because it can cause so much problems. But the kids a lot of times are smoking, and they're smoking in school. We've caught numerous kids over the years of my teaching, kids smoking. A lot of times they're coming in and they're doing it. And parents, if you hear them talk about a cart, that's a cartridge that has marijuana in it, and they're using that and they're smoking that. It's just basically another form of vaping, but using marijuana. But that's a big thing. Marijuana and vaping in the schools is like high. And I know you, as a student, have experienced it. Yeah. And what's been your experience?
Well, I think a lot of the time people think I do it just because other people do it. I've never been offered it, but I've seen a lot of people do it. I know for most people my age, it's really an escape because it makes them feel different. It makes them feel better. Their life, it's really with that home life too, comes into play.
And I completely agree with what you're saying because a lot of them do that as that escape. But at the same time, what they're not understanding is that most of the time kids are doing this because they're depressed, they're sad, they're going through something, but it's not helping that. It's actually going to make them more paranoid, as studies have shown that it messes with kids' cognitive ability, so their ability to think as well and learn, as well as it is now they're seeing that when you do it at a young age, it is actually creating kids to have schizophrenia, which is a mental health illness. Right, so there's long-term effects. But another issue I've noticed with it, and I don't know right now because you're just about to go to high school, so you may notice it more when you get to high school.
Yeah, I think I will.
Because this is the age group where kids are like starting with weed.
I've seen people in my school do it now, even.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. The middle school age is where they're actually like experimenting with weed more. But what I've noticed is that, again, this goes back to my experience with kids, is that a lot of kids who start smoking weed at a young age, they go, oh, that's it. I'm only going to do weed. I'm never trying nothing else. And then by high school, these are the same kids who are now popping pills, who are now trying other, other drugs. Thank you. That they said they weren't going to try. I don't know. I honestly can't even count for you how many of my students I had personally that died of drug overdose, of accidental drug overdose. And these are not kids, again, who I would have thought would have been popping pills. These are kids who were smoking weed and said, oh, I just smoked weed.
It leads to other things too.
Right, and it leads to other things. And we as teachers, we report it, but if they're not high in that moment and the nurse can't prove that they're high in that moment, there is nothing we can do. All we can do is keep reporting, but nothing, we can't stop it. And parents, I mean, it really falls on you to be more vigilant and pay attention to that because a lot of the kids are doing it. And maybe you're not so concerned with weed because you think, oh, well, it's legal in certain places, but alcohol's legal. Cigarettes are legal. Do you want your kids getting drunk? Do you want your kids addicted to nicotine? A lot of people think nicotine's worse than marijuana, but it's right. It's the same thing. It's an addiction. And that's the big thing. Addiction, the earlier you start, the more likely you're going to become addicted to something.
It's harder to get off and like make your mind say, I don't need that. Like it's attached to it at that point.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up about the mind because when we're addicted to something, our minds are telling us that we need that item, whatever it is, to survive, even though in theory we don't. Okay. But what our mind believes that without that, we are not going to survive. We are going to die. So that's why you will see someone, a homeless person in the street who is down and out, but they will find a way to get some cigarettes if they're a smoker, or if they do drugs, they'll find a way to get those drugs, or if they, are drinkers. And I say that because, again, I've seen it and I've experienced it around me growing up. I've seen people who have done that. Okay, I've even seen people I've worked with who are big time cigarette smokers, and they'll tell you, "Oh, I ain't got money for lunch today," but they come in with that pack of cigarettes. They'll have that, and make sure they take care of that because their brain tells them you need that
before food and anything.
Right. It's like feeding, but it's like feeding their mind, the same thing. They might not even have that food money for their kids, but they'll make sure they have that cigarette money for themselves. And so, like, that's what people need to understand. Addiction is very powerful. And it's not as easy to say, "Oh, I don't want to do this anymore," as it is
trying to and actually doing it.
Right. It's very hard. Once you try something and you like it, let's think about food, okay? Both you and I love food, right? So when we try something that we really like,
we're going to go back for it.
Exactly. And the difference is our bodies are going to get full. When you eat, you feel it in your stomach. I've never done drugs. I know people don't believe that's possible, because I grew up in the city, blah, 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 I'm hood, whatever. I've never done drugs. I've never smoked cigarettes. Have I drank? Yes, but never as a teen. But my point is, I can't say what it feels like to do drugs because I've always been scared to try because, well, one, I don't like not feeling in control of myself, but also I've just been scared there was no point. I didn't see no reason. It wasn't something that I wanted to do, but I also knew if I tried it, there's a chance I might get addicted.
Yeah, I feel like I'd be the one person. Like, they say, "Oh, you're not, just hit it one time," and then you end up being more addicted than they are.
Right.
Like, I've seen people at theme parks all the time, like, have it on their neck attached or two in their hand at a time going both at it. And sometimes I think it's to look cool, but sometimes it can genuinely be their brain just wanting that rush or whatever you call it.
And I think you're right that it's more of that it's not even about being cool. They might have tried it to be cool, but now they're addicted to it. Yeah. And they don't want to accept they're addicted to it.
Yeah, they'll tell you no.
No, I can stop whenever. Well, then why aren't you stopping? Oh, because I don't want to. But why don't you want to? Like, if you see somebody constantly sucking on those hookahs and they're sucking and sucking away on it, you're addicted to that, buddy. Newsflash. I know with students that I've worked with in the past who have gotten in trouble for smoking in school. And after, they usually get in trouble, they get suspended, whatever it is. And I talk to them when they come back and I'm like, how are you going to tell me you're not a fiend when you're doing that while you're in school and you know the consequences
it's
of
8
that?
hours, like.
Right. And some of them are doing it multiple times in a day because I know there's been times I've gone into the bathroom and I smell it.
Yeah.
Right. I don't see smoke, but I'll smell it. And I'm like, and I report that. But of course, figuring out who it was is a whole nother, right. It's a whole nother ball game.
Well, speaking on that, my school just installed these, like smoke detectors, but they detect vape smoke. And it's kind of weird because it also just detects like perfume and all that. So it will send not a loud signal. It detects the smoke and then it sends like a message to the principal, and then they go and they capture like who was out at that time. That's why the sign in and out things are
important. They're important, and I know because we have the same thing. We don't have the vape machines in my current location. I know other jobs I worked at, they recently got them because now it's a big thing, but they're expensive.
And like
they're very expensive to install. But the thing is, I don't know if it's been at your school where it's deterred them, but I almost feel like kids aren't going to care because they're still doing it because they're addicted. They're not realizing.
They're not going to care.
Right. They're not realizing. I mean, kids smoke on the school bus. Kids smoke coming to school. Kids are smoking at school on the way home. So how are you going to sit there and say you're not a fiend? You're not addicted to it. You're addicted to it. It's controlling your life because you're willing to get in trouble for it. So that's why, like, we need to realize how, like, prevalent drug use is in our society, and that even though we as adults may say, "Oh, it's only weed, it's not that bad." Again, I go back to I had so many students who have died people died, not just got sick, died of drug overdoses, and not because they were hardcore drug users, but because, oh, I just want to get that extra high today. So I'm going
Yeah.
to smoke. Maybe I'll, drink two. Oh, let me pop a couple of pills or whatever it
Yeah,
is.
it all adds up in your
And
body.
right.
Like,
And it kills them. And so it's not as simple as, oh, it's only weed, because kids we know they drink. God forbid they get in a car and they start driving in college. A lot
so
of kids are
many
doing that.
accidents, but it's not an accident. It's like,
Right, you're drunk driving. And then, like, so the vaping, even the nicotine, a lot of kids are fiends for that. Like, all day long in the bathroom, they're smoking. But again, looking at those statistics from 2016 to 2020, mind you, we're in 2024. 61% it went up in eighth graders. Eighth graders, we are talking 13 to 14-year-old kids, okay, are smoking weed. So regularly, these kids are smoking. And mind you, since 2020, more states have become legal. Okay. So with it becoming legal, more and more kids have access
yeah, and
to
it's
it.
easy to get it these days. Like you see little kids having them, and you're like, where do they get that?
Oh,
Like,
I know. I've had students tell me about their younger siblings who are like in fifth and sixth grade smoking already. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And I'm like that's not good. Like, and you
yeah,
try to educate them and you report these
but they
things.
don't care at that point. They're just like, I don't care. I've been doing it. It's not affecting me because they don't see it inside their body, and they don't. They might feel it. Oh, I'm having headaches. I cough a lot, but they
But
don't seem to care.
have you noticed any, like, of your classmates, or even if not in school, maybe in the street, some of your friends, when they're high, that how they look, how they act?
Well, I don't think a lot of people in my school do it much, but I do see people who vape and they go to the bathroom a lot, or they like try to hide it and stuff like that.
Well, because I know, not just kids, adults. I've been around uh, people smoking weed for a long, long time, and they do not believe that it changes them. But their reaction to things is so slow. And they're like, you can see it in their eyes. The eyes are all glossy
Yeah.
and, closing, and they look sleepy. And they're like almost like sloth like. They move at a slower
Yeah.
pace. And yet they'll tell you, oh no, I'm good, I'm okay, as they sound like that, and you're like, no, you're not. Like,
Yeah,
and then they'll get behind a wheel and drive,
that's so dangerous. Like,
right? Because they think weed doesn't have the same effects as alcohol. Oh, it's different. Now, cigarettes, yes,
oh yeah,
doesn't
that was a
have the
big
same,
topic thing.
but it doesn't have the same effect as alcohol or weed, because it's what it does is different to the body.
Yeah.
But it's still unhealthy for you.
People think vaping is healthier than cigarettes, but it's the same thing, if not worse.
It's actually, studies showed it's actually worse, because what happens is when you're vaping, you're smoking more than one cigarette at a time.
Oh, you can you have more access to it.
And here's a little funny tidbit. Back when vaping first came out,
Mhm.
and they were trying to get it popular, the makers of vaping would go to schools and tell the schools it's safer than cigarettes, and the schools,
Promote.
yes, and the schools would allow them to push it, promote it there,
That's crazy.
because they believed, okay, we're going to get the kids off of cigarettes. This is a little safer. Let's do this
no.
and slowly get them off. But it wasn't. It's not safer. It's actually worse. But that's what they did to sell it. And now you have all these kids who have access. They can go to the corner store. They
Yeah.
can go to the gas
And
station.
now schools, like my school, just last year they personally did they taught us what was in it, and they said batteries, all these chemicals, and it made kids in my class like look and be like, I don't really know if I want to do that anymore, but they will, because it's their brain, and you can't ignore your brain. Doesn't matter what you think.
Right. You have to actually want to really change it and try to do something. And another thing, speaking about drugs, and after this, we'll move on. But big thing with drugs that kids are not understanding, and even some adults, is that you may think you're smoking weed, but that weed can be laced with something else.
Oh, that's another thing. Like fentanyl or any of that can kill you in an instant. You don't know.
Exactly. Even the pills, like most of the time, the pills that I talked about, some of my students back that took, that was laced. A lot of them were laced with something. It wasn't necessarily that the pill they took killed them because of the regular what it was.
How much they took at a time and all that.
Well, it was more because it was laced with something.
Yeah.
But with the weed, it can be laced. And I love when kids go, well, I don't smoke behind anybody. Yes, you do. They all share it. They all smoking behind each other. Unless they grew it for themselves, they don't know what's in it. So stop saying, oh, I know it's good. I know who does this. I know who does that. It can be laced. And if it's laced, you're taking a chance of killing yourself or getting addicted to a different drug that you didn't even know that you were taking, and even with the vapes, you don't know what they're selling in those gas stations. You don't know what's in them. They don't know what's in them. They're just selling
them. They don't care.
Right, exactly. They just want to make money. So they can be selling them and it could be laced with some other drug as well. And then next thing you know, you're doing drugs and you didn't know you were doing drugs. Granted, nicotine is a drug, but you're doing a hardcore drug, a different drug that you didn't know. So again, I mean, parents, we have to be more vigilant. Us as educators, I know we're doing our part. We're doing the best we can with the limited resources we have because we can't do but so much. But kids, you guys need to realize that what you're putting in your body is affecting you and it will have long-term repercussions and you could die from it. Sad to say, but you can. And like I said, I've known many students who have.
All right, guys. Thanks again for joining us. Join us every Monday as we discuss different silent issues.
On next week's podcast, join us as we discuss girls hating on each other. Bye, guys.
Bye.